We just finished up a panel on oil and gas and UAS, sUAS, and we are here with Ro Baily. Ro is retired Brigadier General from the U.S. Air Force and Associate Director of the Alaska Center for UAS Integration. How are you doing today, Ro?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Good. Some of the things that came out of your panel were really interesting. Number one, in terms of sUAS integration in Alaska, Alaska has really been the lead state in the United States on UAS integration. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be and some of the things that Alaska has really been able to accomplish by coordinating that integration on a state level.
I'd be happy to. It's really a combination of a number of different things that happened all at once. Probably the most important, though, is a guy with a passion. He has since moved on, but Greg Walker started our program back in 2001. And he had been involved in unmanned aircraft working for NASA at a prior job and brought that with him to Alaska. And so he just got that ball rolling. But there's other advantages associated with being Alaska, and that is we're a huge state, 2.5 times the size of Texas, with only a little over 700,000 people in population, mostly centered in 3 main population areas.
Right.
And so we have a massive amount of airspace that is pretty much unpopulated. But on top of that, we depend on aviation more than any other state. And it is a routine means of operation for a lot of people who live away from those population centers. And so as a result, even the FAA has used Alaska to explore some of their new technologies. And so you may have heard of ADS-B. ADS-B is a significant technology to advance the ability to fly aircraft closer together because they know where each other are. It was originally tested in Alaska. Why? Because it's a great place to do it and there's not a lot of traffic.
And ADS-B is the technology that allows aircraft to see each other and know where aircraft to aircraft are located as opposed to having to rely on the tower.
That's correct. That's correct. Which means you can actually do self-separation when you're way far away from controlled airspace and you don't have any tower managing what's going on. So that technology is going to be important for the unmanned aircraft world as well.
Yeah. And so if you, and in terms of pulling that off on a state level, should other states be trying to coordinate and work with the FAA to integrate UAS into their airspace? Now, of course, it's the FAA airspace, but within their states.
I think the FAA has now set up the structure with the 6 test sites, and so they're attempting to collect most of their data through that and do the coordination work with that. And so I would encourage a state that hasn't gone down the path at all yet to contact one of the 6 test sites. We are one of them, but there's 5 others out there. We've kind of built up a relationship and have a pretty good understanding of what it takes to get going. In our state, we have the Alaska Legislative Task Force on Unmanned Aircraft. And from that, we're able to develop a strategy for the state, both as an economic strategy and a regulatory strategy. And we're able to come up with some guidelines to help people be smarter about how they use their unmanned aircraft, whether they are commercial or they are toys. And so as a result, we've got a population that's pretty well educated and working pretty well themselves individually with the FAA. So we developed that sort of structure, and it's a structure we're happy to share as well.
Yeah, so what we are seeing in Michigan, where I'm from, is something similar as other states where the legislatures are having these kind of knee-jerk reactions anti-sUAS and trying to limit the use of sUAS in the states, which really from a mid or long-term viewpoint isn't going to promote commerce and isn't going to stop what is already occurring. So what would you say to state legislators across the United States who are looking at enacting limiting legislation to try and curb sUAS?
I would encourage them to bring in a cross-section of people associated with the industry and with the manned aviation world to have a conversation to understand what are the real risks, because there are risks. Mm-hmm. Not just risks of privacy, because that's usually the first one that comes up, but there are risks associated with systems that at this point are pretty much R&D systems. They're not really production systems in most cases. But then, what are the opportunities? What could it do for the problems they have in their state? Every state has their own, but many problems cross many states. The cost to farmers of managing their crops in an efficient way so that they apply the right amount of fertilizer to the places that need it the most, the right amount of water and not too much to the places that need it, and so on, to be able to detect when harvest is best. Those things will help their state's economy.
Right.
Bringing the industry in as an industrial partner also is good. But the reality is you don't have to have that industry in your state in order to get a significant benefit from the use of unmanned aircraft. So listen to your population. Listen to people from outside the state as well. Listen to people who have been in it for a while like us. And again, we're not the only ones, but we've been in it a long time.
Long time. And of course, Alaska's got oil and gas, and that's the panel we just concluded. And what Alaska did is they said, how can we integrate sUAS in order to further our commercial interest in safety and efficiency and really saving money in terms of some of the basic things of inspecting pipelines and these types of activities, managing oil spills. And so have you seen a real benefit to sUAS even in its limited integration thus far in Alaska?
Absolutely. I've seen us use an unmanned aircraft to collect nesting data for red salmon in rivers required because of dams that affected the flow of water. In a situation where 2 helicopters had gone down, in the first case killing the biologist and the pilot on board, the second case the occupants survived but the helicopter was destroyed. We could do it with an unmanned aircraft and completely eliminate the risk to humans. That's a big deal. In fact, we have, like everybody else who does operations at any length, we have lost an aircraft or two. We've crashed them.
Right.
But the one thing we can say 100% of the time is nobody got hurt.
Right.
And that, to me, that is what unmanned aircraft bring above and beyond every other thing. You can go do some of the most difficult, dangerous, risky situations in the world, and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, and safety is a big item. You know, when you were speaking, one of the things I thought was really interesting was your mentioning that you've been able to get permission to do beyond line of sight operations. And there's a lot of commercial operators, a lot of big companies who really are looking forward to being able to do some things beyond the line of sight. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to accomplish with the FAA permission to do some beyond line of sight operations.
Sure. Our first beyond line of sight operation was in 2009. We were operating off of a boat out in the Bering Sea, and we did it by putting together a safety study, an extensive safety study. And in that case, we collected data from NORAD radars, from the FAA radars, from operators who flew manned aircraft out over that area, none of them at 1,200 feet, by the way, all of them at 30,000 feet. But we were able to run a model and determine that the risk of running into a manned aircraft was less than 1 times 10 to the minus 9th, which is the FAA standard. So that gave us our first beyond line of sight approval, and we were allowed to go 5 miles away from the boat. Right. So that was the first one. But the most important aspect about going beyond line of sight is to begin to develop a trust relationship with the FAA. First, you have to show them you will follow the rules meticulously and report on your operations, good or bad, yes, including incidents that may happen, including ones that you're at fault on, yes, and you do it in such a way that they know what they're hearing from you is the truth, that it's the best information you've been able to assemble. And little by little, they're going to give you more approval to do more advanced operations. And so that's how we've done it. We've built this up over time. It's going to get easier as they see more types of operations beyond line of sight, so that they can say, well, we saw University of Alaska did this, we saw, maybe Kansas State University did this, we saw CNN did that. Right. And out of all of those things, we've concluded that particular operation is safe enough to do beyond line of sight.
And one of the things we've really heard at this conference as much as anything is when you're working with the FAA, it's all about data. You have to be able to show them, not just tell them, but show them how your flight operation is going to be safe. And if you've got data to back it up, you're going to be at a significant advantage.
Absolutely. And I'll also tell you, we invite the FAA out to observe our operations all the time. They've gone on deployments on boats with us. They've gone out to some extremely remote areas in Alaska with us. We've had people from Washington, D.C. come out and see their first ever unmanned aircraft flights. operating within 1/2 mile of Fairbanks International Airspace within Class D airspace. We get that approval because we have that history of safe operations and honest reporting. And the more they see and the more they understand, the more they're willing not only to give us permission, but to give others permission. It's an important thing.
It's an important thing. Ro, this has been a really privilege to be able to interview you today.